What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be talking about my top 10 horror villains. So let's get into that. Hi, my name is Leo, and anytime with a movie, TV show, or video game related, or just anything nerdy, you have come to the right place. And like I said, today we're talking about my top 10 horror villains. So without further ado, let's get into the ranking. Now, before I get started, this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. This is my top 10 list. I don't expect all of you guys to agree with what my top 10 horror villains are. And also, I wanted to preface that, I had a difficult time. I was like, what considers a horror villain? Do like the aliens from Alien consider as a villain, or are they just like a threat that's in the movie? Things like that. So I kind of stuck a little bit more to actual horror icons or horror slashers or things like that are a lot more prominent, that have a singular figure in the movie instead of like a horde of zombies or, like I said, the aliens from Alien and Aliens. I stuck to a lot more individual killers and monsters that are actually prevalent in the movie and are kind of the main antagonist throughout the entire time. Now, starting off with my number 10 is going to be Pearl from the X and Pearl movies. This one, the only reason why it's so low in this list is because it's one of the newer ones that we've gotten in the past couple of years. But I do think that already automatically Mia Goth as Pearl has really established herself as this villain. Obviously, we have already seen the final chapter with Maxine, and Pearl was not in that movie for the most part whatsoever, besides a couple of flashbacks or some kind of comments that people make about the previous two movies in Maxine. However, in those first two movies, I do think Pearl as a villain is very prominent and very unique. Where in the first movie, we have her as a very old woman who is still very menacing and creepy and can still fuck some shit up. Like one of the best things in that movie is when she is like dancing with one of the with the cameraman that they're trying to make this porno with, and she just completely tears into his brains, his throat, his chest, and she covers the car in blood, and it has this really cool ominous like red lighting over Pearl. And then when we get actually into the Pearl movie of the origin story of Pearl, Maxine gives such a great performance in this character, and you see how demented and crazy she is, especially with that like 5-minute monologue that she gives. That is one of the most amazing sequences in a movie I've seen in a very, very long time. So I absolutely love Pearl, and she comes in at my number 10. Now, the next couple of ones are probably going to offend some people, but coming in my number 9 is going to be Freddy Krueger. And the only reason why he is so low is because I never really grew up with the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. That wasn't a horror franchise that I watched a lot when I was a little bit younger, still getting myself into that horror genre. But coming a little bit older and finally seeing all the Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, Freddy Krueger has definitely established himself as one of my favorite slashers. I always loved how kind of witty and funny and creative he is, especially when we get towards the later Elm Street movies. In the first one and the first two ones, he's a lot more menacing and dark, and then you see that kind of that charm and that comedy aspect of the Freddy Krueger character come a lot more towards the later establishments, especially like something in Dream Warriors, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. You definitely see why Freddy Krueger is such a beloved slasher. Not only that, he is such a effective slasher, where you have a character that follows you into your sleep and you have no escape, because that's where he kills you. And like we all know, we all need sleep. So sooner or later, he's gonna get you. And just that concept alone of this character just makes him so much more menacing, so much more of a threat, on top of him being such a very charismatic, charming killer at the same time, where you can't keep your eyes off him and you love what he's doing on screen. That is why Freddy Krueger, for me, comes in at my number 9. Now, this was probably gonna get me more in trouble than the last one, but coming at number 8 is going to be Michael Myers. Very similar to Freddy Krueger, I never really grew up with the Halloween franchise. I saw all of them much more later in life. But again, he has quickly established himself as a horror icon. We obviously all know why we love Michael Myers as a killer, as a slasher. He is so menacing. Even just the way Loomis talks about him just in that first movie, about him having the darkest eyes, the blackest eyes, just the monologues that people talk about him. You feel his presence in all these movies. And when you do finally see him and kill people, he is so brooding, he is so strong. You know, it's literally almost impossible to stop him. You know, he's like this unstoppable force, and he has such an iconic look to him. You know, you can let anybody know that doesn't even like horror movies to begin with. If you put that Michael Myers mask in front of them, they will automatically know who that is, who that killer is, a little bit about the story. That's how iconic this killer is. But for me, he comes in at my number 8. And coming in at my number 7 is going to be the Creeper from Jeepers Creepers. And yes, I know about all the different stuff about the director and about all the shitty movies that came after Jeepers Creepers. I can have some fun with Jeepers Creepers too, but for me, if I try to stay it at his own merit with the original Jeepers Creepers, I do think that this monster slasher, whatever you want to call it, is one of the most effective horror villains of all time. Again, so menacing. Out of every horror villain probably in all horror history, this is probably one of the villains I would want to be against the least. He is so threatening, he's quick, menacing, vicious, aggressive, and he's such a great character creature design. He is so iconic for me. I have a tattoo of him on my leg, so I really love the Creeper. And even just in that first movie, he gets established right away, you know, where you have these two kids driving down the street. He comes in that big hulking truck, just honk honk. You know, that is so effective, that is so scary and creepy. And he established himself in that movie right away, where you see him as an absolute threat right from the jump. And once you start revealing that he is kind of more of this monstrous creature, and it gets to like that ending climax, again, such an effective creature design, such an effective killer, and I absolutely love the Creeper. So he comes in at my number 7. And coming in at my number 6, we are going to have the Candyman. Helen. Tony Todd as the Candyman, again, is so effective. He is so tall and menacing. He has that great voice, where in that, especially in that scene in the parking lot, is so effective and so chilling when he's just trying to tell Helen to be his victim. Just that deep voice and his presence. I absolutely love Tony Todd as the Candyman, and I also love the way they utilize his character, or utilize the Candyman within that movie, where we don't really see the Candyman that much, but his presence is everywhere in that movie, to the legends, to the copycats, to all the research and everything that you see in this movie. You feel the Candyman's presence, and he slowly starts to eat away at Helen into her, you know, her final death. And that is just such an effective killer and monster, where you have something that you don't see that often in the movie, but the entire time you're waiting to see when he's going to show up, because that weight of the Candyman is on everyone's shoulder in that movie, and it becomes such an effective horror film. So I absolutely love the Candyman, and he comes in at my number 6. And coming in at my number 5, we are going to have Pennywise. Both from the 1990 miniseries and these newer version, I think both are effective in their own right, where you have the original Tim Curry version that was a lot more kind of whimsical and had this really like kind of new age clown costume with the very vibrant colors and even the way he acts and everything. And then you have the Bill Skarsgård version, which is a lot more like that Victorian era type of clown that is also extremely effective as well. And I think both of these movies did a great job showing and portraying Pennywise in all of his forms, when it comes to the clown forms or his shape shifting or whatever the case may be. And I still always remember the first time I ever saw Pennywise in action. I didn't even know I was walking into watching this movie. I walked in midway during the scene where he's in the shower and he like rips the drain apart, and he's just torturing the kid, you know, with his asthma and everything like that. That, like, to me, that scene was so effective, and that just kind of lodges in my mind as a memory of this character that absolutely made me fear him, but also love him and want to explore that character more. And then you get these remakes that I thought were just done so well, had such great characters. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise did such an amazing job as well. So I absolutely love this character. This is kind of one of my first horror characters that really introduced me into this genre. So for me, Pennywise comes in at my number 5. But coming in at my number 4, we are going to have David Powers from The Lost Boys. And yes, I do see him as a horror villain. He is the antagonist throughout this entire movie. And I just love David because, one, I love this movie, The Lost Boys. I love vampire movies. But the great thing about David is that the entire time, you know that he is the bad guy. You know that he is the evil one in this movie, the one that you have to triumph over. But for some reason, you want to be around him. You think he's so cool. He is so charismatic. Just the way he walks and talks and acts, like you want to be friends with this guy. And that makes him so much more menacing because you feel like he can just manipulate you with his charm, with his charisma, just the way he is. And he has such a badass look. Even to this day, that mullet that he has is fucking awesome. He kills that haircut in such a great way. But David Powers, just as a vampire, is so menacing. And I just love this movie, the style of it. And again, just him being this very calm, charismatic person, but you know that he is the bad guy, for me, makes him a very effective villain within this movie, a very effective antagonist to our main cast. So for me, David comes in at my number 4. But coming in at my number 3, we are going to have Art the Clown, the new kid on the block. When the first Terrifier came out, a lot of people were praising Art the Clown as the new horror icon, and I had a little bit of trouble of giving him that crown yet. You know, he was definitely effective, definitely creepy. I absolutely love that movie, but there wasn't enough meat on the bone for me to consider him a new horror icon until we got Terrifier 2. And when Terrifier 2 came out, that instantly became one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And Art the Clown cemented himself as one of my favorite horror slashers of all time. And I mean, what can I say? If you've seen these movies, you know how bombastic and gory and gross and crazy these movies can get. And Art the Clown is all the more charming while you're watching it, where you feel so disgusted and grossed out, but you can't keep your eyes off him to see what he's going to do next. These movies go so far, but yet you want to go far with them and continue watching them. So I absolutely love Art the Clown. I can't wait for Terrifier 3. I hope it is as good as Terrifier 2, if not even better. And from all the early reviews I'm hearing, people are going nuts over this. You know, I get a little skeptical when it comes to early reviews, but I am so excited. And for me, Art the Clown comes in at my number 3. But coming in at my number 2, we are going to have Ghostface. And more specifically, Ghostface from the original Scream, where you have Billy and Stu. I still enjoy a majority of the Ghostface reveals after this first movie, but this first movie is just one of the best horror movies in my opinion, one of my favorite horror movies of all time, my top 5 or top 10 for sure. But just Billy and Stu, their dynamic, especially once they finally get revealed and you see how sadistic and how just manipulating these characters are, and especially with Billy, the way he talks to Sydney and belittles her, and then you have Stu, this character that, you know, you feel like he wanted to be there, but there is some sort of that peer pressure that he says that is kind of true. Like he feels like he was a little forced to do this, but he wanted to do it at the same time. And his character feels like he's so much more crazy and unhinged, and Billy's a lot more calm and in control. And I just love that contrast between those two characters. And I just absolutely love Matthew Lillard as a person. I think he's such a fantastic actor, such an underrated actor for sure. And I just love him in this movie. His kind of little monologue that he gives to Sydney while they're in the kitchen, one of my favorite sequences of all time in horror movie history. So I absolutely love Ghostface, absolutely love Billy and Stu. So Ghostface for me comes in at my number 2. But if any of you have seen my videos in the past year, you probably already know by now that my number 1 is going to be Charles Lee Ray, Chucky, Mr. Chuckman, the Chuckers, Little Man, whatever you want to call him. I absolutely love Chucky. Chucky is one of the best horror villains of all time. Even in that first movie, before they realize how great of a character Chucky really is, and they haven't really utilized him to his full potential. Once we get into Child's Play 2, Child's Play 3, and especially Bride of Chucky, he has just transcended himself. He is such a funny, charismatic killer. Again, very similar to a lot of these previous slashers where he does so many crazy sadistic things, but you don't want to keep your eyes off of him. And I absolutely also love just the design of the Chucky doll. One of my favorite designs in a horror movie. I have a tattoo of him as well. And I didn't mention I do have a tattoo of Ghostface on my leg as well too. So, you know, you can tell that these are some of my favorite horror villains of all time if I'm willing to put them on my body permanently. But for me, Chucky, he is just, again, so funny, has such great kills, so creative, such a great story, such a great origin. The way the voodoo magic works within the story is so much fun. I just have such a blast with this character where I can watch these movies anytime and just have such a great time. I can't wait so I can get my own Chucky doll. You know, my popcorn bucket is as close as I'm gonna get for now, but once I finally get my own Chucky doll, I'm gonna be so ecstatic. But for me, Chucky, Charles Lee Ray, one of the best horror movie villains of all time. In my opinion, the best horror movie villain of all time. So he comes in at my number 1. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. Let me know your top 10 horror villains of all time in the comment section and down below. Love to hear all of you guys' lists and thoughts. But again, if you guys like anything movie, TV show, or video game related, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.